I mean, does this country even continue to survive at this rate?
I think we cease to exist as the United States that we know it based on some of the things we talked about. People that say that it's not that bad. Well, they haven't arrived in their cities yet. Talk to people that have lived along the border that these people are passing through when they're caught and released. Talk to the people in Chicago that are getting booted out of their public sector areas and their housing locations because they're making room for migrants. Look at what's happened in New York City. These are things that, that are impacting Americans that should never happen.
The southern border is wide open. It's wide open. Yeah, we have an open border. Now, if you say that online, there's going to be people who push back and say, no, our border's secure. It's not open at all. Well, we're going to dispel with some myths today. And you don't have to hear it from me. You're going to hear it from a subject matter expert. Now, if our southern border is truly open, and I'm going to contend on today's episode with my guest that it is wide open and something has to be done about it, we're about to lose our identity. If we lose the strength that we have had for so many generations, the literal adhesive, the glue that has held the globe together is going to disappear. And the world is going to go into chaos. Now, that's not extremism. That's just common sense and facts. America has held the world together in a very big way for many, many generations now. Today, Chris is going to educate you. And it's an education you can trust because he's a guy who, with multiple decades of experience on the southern border, he has seen everything there is to see. He's dealt with the White House. He's dealt with the bureaucracy. He's dealt with the state and federal governments. He knows what's going on. He's dealt with the Mexican government. Here's a guy that will dispel the myths, and that's what I wanted this episode to do. So I'm going to ask him some questions, and he's going to do the talking because that's what matters, is what he has to say. So I want you to be able to use this as an encyclopedic reference. When people want to have a discussion about the southern border and they're pushing back and they're saying that the narrative is false, I want you to share this episode with them and remind them that this is a guy who knows what's going on and you can trust his judgment and his knowledge. So I want you to drink a cup of coffee and wake up. I want you to put on your thinking cap and I want you to listen. I want you to listen closely to the things that Chris Clem is about to tell this audience, because what he speaks is the truth and they're facts that more specifically and importantly, you can use to win this battle. This is a battle that matters. Remember what I said, whoever wins this debate is going to determine the future of America. It's more than just policy. It's more than just bureaucracy. Folks, everything we believe in as a country is up for grabs right now, and we're losing this battle. So put on the pay attention hat, and let's dig into my conversation with my good friend, Chief Chris Clem. Here we go. Chris, welcome to the show, man. You're popping up everywhere these days, dude. You're too popular for me. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. I don't want to have too much overexposure, but yeah, I appreciate many opportunities, and I especially appreciate the opportunity to be with you today because, as you mentioned in your opening piece here, it is something that affects every one of us, and if we don't get our border security under control, we will cease to have a country. And been saying it for a long time, even when I was chief, and every state's a border state and every town's a border town if we don't have a secure border. And so, yeah, keep pumping that message out, please. And, people need to hear it. And hopefully it's starting to resonate. Unfortunate events kind of keep it in the headlines, but I think it's waking up middle America because they're starting to feel it.
It's hard to argue with the numbers. It's hard to argue with the facts. And I do my best to just push that out there, or at least back up my opinion with why I have that opinion, right? Sometimes I read this stuff and you get on, let's say, X or Instagram, and you make comments about what's going on at the southern border, and then everybody wants to push back at you, and they say, no, the border is actually secure. It's not open. The Biden administration is doing a great job. They've had more deportations than the Trump administration. Trump didn't have anything to do with border security. He didn't fix the border. In fact, our problems now are just they're stuff that spilled over from the Trump administration. And I can refute all of those things, but How many, do you ever run across things that people, let's say, that are a little more conservative leaning like me and who are passionate about this, do you run across things where you're like, yeah, no, that's wrong. Like maybe it is a little more secure than we think it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, are we pushing a false narrative by saying that we have an open border?
No. I think there's obviously it's more to it, right? Oftentimes, what people get hooked up on is, they conflate immigration with border security, and I think that's the biggest problem with our elected officials and some of our mainstream media, and even some of the conservative folks out there, and certainly the far left likes to conflate it because it gives a victim and a boogeyman type argument for them. But let me just break that down. Look, I think that as long as we have controls in place, we determine who, what, and when, and why, and how, we continue to be an open immigration welcoming country based on what America needs. What does the businesses need? What do the communities need? What does the agriculture need? What does academia need? That is lawful pathways the way our system is designed. That comes through a port of entry. That's somebody who's applying for an application to come here. Even those that we want to help that may be living in a bad situation and truly being persecuted, there is a right way to come through and come into the country. What's happening at the southern border right now, and what has been happening in the last 3 years, is the complete opposite of controlled, lawful immigration. It is uncontrolled, chaotic, illegal immigration. And that's people coming in from between the ports of entry. And that is what gets mixed up, and this what gets conflated, as I mentioned, is lawful immigration, which I think, again, like I mentioned, if it's done controlled and in the best interest of America, we continue to support that. But illegal immigration is exactly that. It's illegal. It's against our laws. And that is what causes vulnerabilities in our border security posture. And that's what's creating all the chaos down here in the southern border. And we could definitely dive into that. But I'm hoping I kind of answered that question, but I think there's more to that story, right?
Hey guys, for 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And when I say the only one, trust me, they are the only one. And Patriot Mobile has been a great supporter of this show, and I'm proud to continue partnering with them. Patriot Mobile offers dependable nationwide coverage, and they give you access to all 3 major networks, which means you're going to get the same dependable coverage that you're accustomed to without funding leftist causes. See, when you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're sending a message. You're saying that you support free speech, religious liberty, the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, our first responder, and our military heroes. And they have a 100% US-based customer service team, which is going to make switching so easy. You can keep your number, keep your phone. Call them up. They'll help you upgrade with a brand new phone. Whatever you need, their team will help you find the best plan for your needs. You go to patriotmobile.com/Chad. You can call them on the phone if you want to, 972-PATRIOT. Talk to them. And you get free activation when you use promo code CHAD. I spell it Chad. That's right. Join me. Make the switch today. Go to patriotmobile.com/Chad. That's patriotmobile.com/Chad. Use promo code Chad. Call them up, 972-PATRIOT. I'll tell you what's frustrating me right now, Chris. Like the narratives that I see that just sort of piss me off, and it's like I don't know how these people get together and come up with all the same narratives to push, but they do. So like right now, I don't want the murder of Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia, to be used for political purposes, right? I don't think that the murder but again, this was a murder that happened because of a federal policy, right? When Biden enacted however many executive orders he did in the first 3 months he was in office, I want to say it was like 90-something
94
executive orders. And he's wanting, now he's saying we need a bill or we need legislation to help us to secure the border. Well, first of all, I thought there was no border problem. I mean, if you listen to the left for the last 3 years, they said, no, the border's secure. Now it's an election year and they're saying we got to do something about the border, and these mean old Republicans won't pass this border bill. We can talk about that. But then they say, the State of the Union, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and all of that stuff where they say, say her name, talking about Laken Riley. And then on Twitter, everybody gets together and says, well, you're not saying the names of the kids that were murdered in a Uvalde school shooting or this school shooting or that school shooting. And I'm like, Yeah, but you can't point to a single federal policy that would have changed that school shooting. Those weren't caused by a, quote, federal policy. This murder could have been avoided because this was an illegal. And you have Joe Biden who goes on and apologizes for calling this guy, this murderer, an illegal in the State of the Union. What do you think about that? I mean, when they're taking that and they're twisting it in such a way, am I wrong in thinking that? Like, I mean, you can't equate what happened with Lake and Riley with school shootings. Those are caused by two completely separate issues. What do you think?
Well, I think when you look at common sense and free thinkers, we don't get this sheep mentality. And that's why that a lot of left-leaning folks and those progressive folks are thinking one way. And that's why they do so well combating media or using media and social media. And even, in politics, right? Because they do align behind one party, if you will, where typical conservatives are going to be using common sense and think rationally and can have opposing views. But look, I will tell you this, and I do agree. I do not like the death of Lake and Riley or any immigrant-related or illegal immigrant-related death to be used for political purposes or grandstanding. But if it can be used as an example of why security is important, why detention is important, why consequences are important, why a failed policy out of the administration is important in impacting American lives, then we're going to have to do that so they don't die in vain, right? But yeah, you can't equate the Uvalde shooting to what happened in Athens. You can't equate, with the Uvalde shooting to those folks that assaulted the police in New York that were released. Those are failed policies by this administration. And, that's the one thing that I was talking to on another network this morning was about what Biden said at the State of the Union and calling Ibarra an illegal alien, the accuser. Look, alien is defined by the Immigration and Nationality Act, been in law for many, many years. And this administration, even when it was Obama-Biden, started that normalization of illegal activity, bad behavior, especially when it comes down to illegal border crossers. They were always illegal aliens. That's how I was taught. That's how we talked about it. That's how we were trained. And then it became they're going to be undocumented immigrants or undocumented migrants. Couldn't be immigrants because immigrants is actually a past tense, like they've immigrated. And now they become migrants, asylum seekers, which is a completely false narrative. And now the latest thing that's been floating around is newcomers. I mean,
newcomers,
with that Lake and Riley murder, and I don't want to keep talking about that, but the exchange between Green and the president, calling him an illegal. I mean, that needed to happen. And I think the response, like especially from the progressives trying to say, oh, well, he didn't mean to do that. They need to sit that one out. They need to recognize that this is something that at least half of the American people believe is horrendous and that could have been at least prevented, mitigated anyway, reduced the chances at best had they had strong policies that would allow detention and immediate hearings and removals. And lastly on that is, remember, these sanctuary cities, he had been arrested in New York before. Had they had not had a sanctuary policy, they would have contacted ICE. At least that's how it works, right? Any non-citizen. And again, I want to make sure people understand the detainer programs that we used to own in the Border Patrol, but it basically was taken over by ICE when we formed the Department of Homeland Security. That's for arrest of any non-citizen. And we would be notified and we would verify is that something that we're going to pursue when the state or local charges are done? Because some of them could be a green card holder, but it was a misdemeanor. Well, we're not going to deport that person for a misdemeanor. But if they are a legal alien, somebody that's been here undocumented, we would take them into custody. So those detention programs actually maintain the integrity of the immigration policies and the immigration enforcement of the laws in this country. So every time you see these stories about sanctuary cities or refusing to cooperate, it really just whittles away at the integrity of our immigration policy for this country. And it's quite alarming because I think what we're seeing now or going to see is just the tip of the iceberg, given so many people that have been caught and released. So, and I want to go back to the numbers here real quick, Chad, if you allow me.
Sure.
I think it's important for the audience, and they can look all this up on cbp.gov. But 2019, I think our national numbers were just over 900,000. They dropped to just over 400,000, 405,000. All right. In fiscal year 21, they jumped up to 1.66 million, then to 2.2 million. And I think we're at 2.2 to 2.4 million Border Patrol arrests in 23. So when you look at that narrative, who was president in 19? What was happening in 19? The wall was being built. The policies were put in place to close loopholes, hold source countries accountable, and get the cooperation. And then those numbers dropped to just over 400,000. And then all that was taken away by the 94 executive actions that were signed by President Biden beginning on Inauguration Day. And those numbers shot up to 1.66 million, and they continue to climb for 3 more years. And they're going to fall between probably 22 and 23, fiscal year 22 and 23 numbers as we close out this year, because now it's getting important because he's polling. Now, I talked a long time. I apologize about that, but I want you to kind of tell that narrative.
I want you to, because that's. I mean, you are. You and I met, I think, on a Newsmax program that we did with John Bachman, and I've paid attention to what you've had to say on social media for quite some time now. So I'm like, hey, Chris is the subject matter expert. I want you to educate me, because there's so many of these things that I'm so passionate about it, but I want to make sure that I'm educated on it, because this matters, right? This matters, and we got to face the narrative and fight it with real facts and real numbers, real statistics. One of those things is these folks come into the country, and listen, I'm back to saying, I say illegals. Every now and then I'll have somebody that writes something for me and they'll put migrants in there. And I'm like, no, birds migrate. They come somewhere and they go back home. They fly south for the winter and then they fly back. These people have no intention of going back home. This is not the same thing as, people in South Texas. People would have, they were day workers. They would come across the border, they would go to work, and then they would go back home in Mexico. Yep. This is not that. Right. That's not what we're dealing with. These people are all over the country. As you said, every state is now a border state. These people are going to get counted in the census. That census is going to determine representation in Washington, D.C.
And you're spitting those facts out now that used to be conspiracy. Most of those conspiracy folks have been right, more right than wrong, and that you're onto something. But continue, please, because this is.
But no, I mean, and correct me there if I'm wrong. I mean, these people are going to get counted on the census. It's going to determine the representation in Washington, D.C. We're headed towards a disaster when we talk about policy and diplomacy and just how this country is run. Being, people who live in a fantasy world, an illusion. Give me a logical reason. Yep. Why in the hell would any mayor want their city to be a sanctuary city? Yeah. I mean, how does that even logically make sense? Okay, you get a woke pat on the back for being so understanding and compassionate, but now you see what's happening, right? Yeah. These Eric Adams, he doesn't want that. I mean, San Diego County, they're out of money. Chicago, they're in a nightmare. Why do they want that? I mean, give me one good reason why anybody would want that for their city.
I don't know if it's a good reason. It's not a reason I would want, but it is really about that get that pat on the back from the progressives that want to really say, we got to welcome all people and all this kind of stuff. One of the arguments that they like to use is, well, if we cooperate with federal immigration and they feel like they're going to be deported, they'll fail to report crimes, or if they're victims, or they'll fail to be witnesses. Well, look, that again is another misnomer, because first of all, birds of a feather, all right, flock together on this situation. Second of all, there are actually visa programs in place. If you are a victim, if you are a witness, we can legally, one of the good reasons why we parole people in and allow them to stay is if they are going to be a witness in the best interest of the government. So that is just something that stuck, and they able to use it. Is we want people to report crimes and cooperate with local police without the fear of deportation. But they're starting to see the blowback from that, because the crime waves are continuing, and and people are pushing back. You mentioned Eric Adams. I'll tell you this. I kind of laugh now, and I get asked this question a lot about, the sanctuary policies in New York. I will say this. He sent his team, his deputy mayor and some of his security advisors down to Del Rio and to Yuma. And I met with that team, and we showed them in everything. We gave them a complete tour, the facts, all this stuff. It said, come into a city near you if you don't get on board. And so fast forward a year later, and he's, screaming at the top of the mountains and the other way, like, stop this now. We told him it was coming. And so I applaud him for coming down to ground zero, because at the time, Yuma was leading the nation. He actually went to two busiest sectors, Yuma and Del Rio, but they didn't learn. They actually did just the opposite for a few months, and now they're feeling the pain of it. A couple things, too. I mentioned this earlier today on another show, was the whole term about, they call them illegals or migrants or UDAs, which is undocumented aliens. Look, to me, it's tomato. I mean, the law says illegal alien. I was taught that way. I'm going to say that. I try to recognize the audience and use the right language, but I don't care what you call them. Yeah. If there is a consequence and we are upholding and enforcing the rule of law. I don't care, because if they cross between two ports of entry, which means they've broken the law, 8 U.S.C. 1325, they should be administratively held and removed if they meet those requirements, or criminally prosecuted depending on the circumstances surrounding the event. Call them what you want, but they're going to be arrested, and we need to go through that process. I agree. They are illegal aliens. That's what these statutes call and define them. But I don't want to get that distracts the narrative sometimes to like, hey, we need to focus on what's happening. Not what we're calling. They're breaking the law. They have violated the law. It's put there in place. And this administration specifically is trying to normalize that by calling them things like migrants and asylum seekers and newcomers. I mean, that's a slap in the face to all the ones that went through the real process to come over here, the ones that come over here daily to work and go back, and also for the ones that really are escaping persecution, that really do have a valid refuge and asylum claim, but they're broad brushed them for political purposes. And one other thing that I think that you mentioned here just a second ago, we don't ever hear what the plan is, right, from this administration. So we start kind of, inserting our own facts, and it really has got me thinking, and I've said it a few times, and others have echoed it. And you just mentioned it. It is about shifting the balance of power. The census does not care what your status is, whether you're an American or not. It's about, are you a warm body? And that will give more representative positions, or could, and possibly get more shift towards electoral college. So if you are a left-leaning state, high blue state, put more people in there to get you more elected officials, more representatives. If you are a purple state where your balance of power is shifted, throw more people in there that are likely to count your way. That's how you ensure that political power for a long time. That's the only, if that's the case, Chad, and they're evil geniuses behind this, at least we know the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. But that is the only thing I could think of why a country would allow this self-inflicted wound. Because this is not normal migration. This isn't normal legal immigration. This is chaotic, uncontrolled, illegal immigration that no country can sustain and absolve these numbers. We're not seeing it anywhere else in the world. Why does it have to be the United States, other than that potential theory, which I think is more closer to truth than it is fiction? But I'd welcome to hear from the president why we're doing it, and change my mind. I'll apologize for even floating that idea. If somebody could tell me what the plan is, whether I like it or not, at least tell me the truth.
Well, the day after the State of the Union, they caught up with Biden on the tarmac outside of Air Force One, and they asked him about the use of the word illegal, and he said, "Well, they're not supposed to be here."
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you can't make this crap up.
So isn't that funny? that's another one of the things that really kind of ticked me off. And I know I'm fighting an uphill battle on this, but go back to September 2021 when he was on national TV with the Del Rio Horse Patrol incident, when he was like, those people will pay for strapping those people. That was a lie. I mean, that did not happen. It was echoed by the vice president, the secretary. None of them walked it back. None of them have apologized. It's been 3 years. We haven't heard an apology or even a remote the information we were provided initially looked like this. We've now since reviewed it. It's been under investigation. That didn't happen. And walk away. Didn't get that. Boy, within 24 hours of calling somebody an illegal, we got apologies and everybody supporting his, he didn't really mean it. That just shows you how politics is so divisive. He was, he is the divider in chief 2.0. It's just offensive. It's just offensive that the administration at the highest levels support that kind of language and have no problem, bashing the half the country and their political beliefs. But boy, call a criminal, illegal alien and illegal publicly, and oh my gosh, the sky is falling. But and then again, we're going back to Lake and because I think it hits home with so many people, because that could be their son or daughter, could happen in their neighborhood. But Chad, one of the things you'd mentioned was kind of educating the public and educating you on some of the things that I've experienced, and it really, I think that even some of the folks on the right could get wrong is the border wall and the wall system and how important that is. But, you don't need it from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. You need it where it makes sense, right? Like urban areas where we've determined, Border Patrol agents have determined, hey, people can vanish within seconds to minutes. If you don't have something that slows it down, they're going to be gone. And in the operating environments that we operate, urban, rural, and remote, those things matter. And our definition in the Border Patrol that a wall, fence, wall, whatever that barrier is intended to deny or impede entry or control and contain entry. So there's areas where you have a land border that it can deny and impede entry. But like places where you have a river border like Texas or in parts of Arizona where I had the Colorado River, we had to concede some land. So we're not impeding or denying an entry. We're controlling and containing it where it makes sense. You get into some of the rural and remote areas, if you don't have, the wall there is great, but there's nothing out there to monitor it. It's so far out there, people are going to go up and over. So that's where the technology, the lights, the sensors, the cameras, and most importantly, access roads out there. And that was part of the wall system. Candidate Trump ran on Build the Wall, great soundbite. When he became president, he recognized, hey, it was more than just building this big, beautiful wall. It was an entire requirements package that Border Patrol had developed, the agents had developed. Send it to people like me, who was a sector chief, get it up there. And another thing people don't always recognize is that 1994 crime bill that you hear President Biden refer to, that put a lot of law enforcement on the street, to include me. I was hired of the first 5,000 police officers, to include border guards, which was a quote by President Clinton on that in that State of the Union in '95, I think it was. That began the process of building up the strength of the Border Patrol. And every administration I worked for, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, the first four I mentioned had leaned forward and taken big time steps to secure the border. Clinton hired a bunch of us and started doing some patchwork with some operations and some temporary fencing. Obviously, we had the tragedy of 9/11, so that it put a whole other focus on border security. And then under Obama, at least going into his second term, if you remember, he wanted comprehensive immigration reform, and the Republicans said, we want border security. So they compromised. You give us border security, we'll give you immigration reform. He started building a lot of wall, a lot of 15-foot wall, hundreds of miles of wall. he started deporting a lot of people because he was actually covering up his side of the bargain. It was actually the Republicans that kind of pushed back and couldn't, and I started arguing about the definition of control. And so Obama's like, fine, I've got a cell phone and a pen. So he started doing his executive actions on his reform. And that caused the whole problem. And he just basically said, all right, I'm done worrying about the security part. And that's when we started seeing the dynamic change of single adult Mexican males that were coming looking for work to Central American families, children, unaccompanied children, all that started beginning. And that's when then you move it into President Trump. We all know what he did. He built so much of that system only to have it all unraveled, completely stopped, starting on day one. And so for everybody to recognize, and I think your audience does know this, but when that contract ended on building the wall, it stopped the lights, the cameras, the technology package, the access roads, everything. And so that is what's led to this complete out of control chaos. And I just gave the numbers earlier. How do you go from 400,000 to 1.66 million? You do that by doing 94 executive actions and halt deportations for 100 days. That's what this president did. So I talked a long time on that, but I hope I threw some things out there and
you did
settled some things or got you some more questions.
Hey guys, the information I'm about to share with you could radically change your life. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you because right now there's a silent epidemic that is affecting over 100 million Americans. You know what it is? It is a fatty liver. You want to know why you feel sluggish, why you can't sleep, why you gain weight? You feel terrible. It's because you're throwing everything at your liver, cholesterol, toxins, alcohol, cigarettes, you name it. It's crazy. Your liver does so many things to help you every single day, so many different functions. You ought to be helping your liver. So I want to encourage you, if you want to look better, you want to feel better, you want to sleep better, fix your liver, okay? And you can do that with Liver Health Formula. It's an all-natural supplement. It contains 11 clinically proven botanicals that will help recharge and protect your liver. The company's already helped more than 2 million fellow Americans with their products, and they're a proud sponsor of this show for a long time, and I'm proud to continue telling you all about Liver Health Formula. You can try Liver Health Formula and get 5 free gifts from the company. You heard me correct. That's 5 gifts for free. You got to go to getliverhelp.com/Chad. Claim your free bonus gifts with your order today. It's helped people in my family. It's helped me. I take it daily. Getliverhelp.com. That's getliverhelp.com/Chad. Chris, you're the best interview ever, dude, because I don't have to ask. You take the questions I'm going to ask and you go ahead and answer them, and that's what I want you to do. Yep. Because that, what I want to be able to do with this episode is I want to be able to take it and have it packaged so we can say, here's the information. Now, what do you want to do about this? You can keep playing these games online and going with your little narrative back and forth. But at the end of the day, people like Ibarra who attacked and murdered Laken Riley, he didn't ask her political party.
Right.
I have no clue what this young lady's affiliations or thought processes or leanings were. That doesn't matter. They don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or don't give a damn about politics at all. What's happening here is when violence happens, it's indiscriminate.
Right.
And I do believe that a huge majority of the people who come to our southern border do so because they want a better life, right? They've heard that clarion call of an invitation by this administration, and they're coming. But when you've got 165 nations represented in the apprehensions or encounters in a fiscal year,
right,
there's not 165 nations south of us. So these people, Chinese nationals that are coming here, people from the Middle East. Now, in San Diego County, we shared this clip the other day. My friend Jorge Ventura, he took it in San Diego County where they're just doing these mass bus releases on the street because they're out of money.
Yep.
The immigration money is all gone for their aid and their help. It's breaking the bank, breaking the system, but the people just keep on coming. And you have to know that there are people with nefarious intentions who are coming into this country. It's just logical, right? And so my friend, and he's probably sick of me using his name in this, but Sheriff Joe Frank Martinez down in Del Rio.
Right. I know Joe Frank.
Texas.
Good man.
He's a good man, and he'll tell you he's a Democrat. He voted for Joe Biden. He didn't like Donald Trump, but he'll also tell you Donald Trump had it under control.
Yeah.
And that's honest, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate his assessment in that. But are we correct in that assessment? Do you feel that Donald Trump in his administration, he didn't get everything done that he wanted or that he promised? I understand that, but there was a lot standing in his way as well. But was it under control?
Yeah, I always say Trump's policies were clunky but effective. Like we got our, the first thing we did in the day is I checked my work emails and I checked Twitter because, or X now, because that's kind of was the trajectory of what we were going to do, right? And I know even some of the higher level officials were looking to see if they were still employed, based on social media platforms. But yes, absolutely, we were probably positioned at that point in my career. I had 25 years in. I did another 2+ years under Biden, but and we were at one of the most safest and most secure border, because secure border, who, what, and when you can respond and resolve the situation. But yeah, the policies were effective. First and foremost, there were, when I say clunky, there were things, and I'll get them wrong, so I'll just kind of generalize them. But I was always at least 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours behind the East Coast. So we'd get a call, 4 or 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening saying, hey, effective at midnight, do X, Y, Z. That's coming down from the White House. Will something official go out tomorrow? All right. So this is like when I was in El Paso. I was the deputy chief there. So I'm making a call to the division chief, getting all the station commanders on board. Hey, effective midnight, do X, Y, Z. Well, then the downfall of being 2 or 3 hours behind, I get called at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. Hey, waking me up. Hey, did y'all do that? I'm like, who are you talking to? You only tell me once, we're going to get it done. And we'll stop, because we didn't run it by council yet, and we still got a couple things. We didn't call Mexico. And I'm like, okay, give us a few hours so that we'd find out. And then by noon or the next day, we'd say effective tomorrow at 8 o'clock, you can begin the policy. So there was a lot of that start-stop thing, like there were, because people were so quick to get the boss's stuff out. Let's be the first ones out there. So that was always kind of tough for us at the sector command to have to, give orders and then turn around and say, oh, wait, pause. That happened on a few policy initiatives. But once they got up on plane and we were riding, boy, they were great. Like migrant protection protocol was a great example, the Remain in Mexico. Mexico City was aware, but the port of entries in El Paso and Juarez weren't. So we had to kind of slow start that. But once we got that up and running, it worked. And yes, he held Mexico accountable. I had some of the best cooperation with my Mexican counterparts along the border and even in Mexico City under the Trump administration, because he had a backbone and was going to hold them accountable. And we worked cooperatively together. That actually saved lives and helped, reduce so much of the clutter that was happening at the border. That is a true statement that I have no problem saying with my hand raised. We were effective under the Trump administration. Did I agree with everything, how he was going about it? Not necessarily, but I wouldn't do that with anybody. I'm going to take my own take to it. But when it came down to the safeguards and the security we were prioritizing, the fact that he had our agency and our agents back meant so many people were just ready to go to work every day because we knew we had the support. And that's one of the big things that has changed under this administration, aside from the tangible things of reversing policies and ending, construction and practices, was the intangible, which is the lack of support and some of the things coming out of the White House, which is, a complete 180 from what we're used to. So yeah, long-winded answer, which I'm very loquacious about things, but, that is true. The policies, made us more effective. And I could have just said that, but I think it's important for people to understand how it works, right? It's a 3,000-mile screwdriver sometimes, and it works both ways. So,
I would assume, and I talk with a lot of my friends who are Border Patrol agents and have been for a long time, and I would assume working for the federal government can't be easy. Dealing with bureaucracy, It's always got to be a high level of bullshit that you're dealing with.
High level is an understatement.
The right arm doesn't know what the left arm's doing. Neither one of them cares, and you guys are kind of caught in the middle trying to do your job and do your duty. And I'm pretty protective. I'll go back. What you referred to earlier, like the young man on the horse, and he was accused of whipping was a Haitian.
Yeah,
in that situation,
it was like 16,000 Haitians. See, that That distracted from the problem, so they could make the problem being the Border Patrol agent.
Yeah, that rhetoric really pissed me off, and I'm on record. I had some very strong words on a video that I released in regards to that, because again, this was a dangerous narrative that they were pushing on that. I mean, there was a price on that agent's head. That's a dangerous deal. You get into stuff like that, and you're pushing a false narrative like that. What it was good horsemanship, is what it was, and also an effective tool on the southern border in a situation like that.
Yes,
and then they pulled all the horses off the border with that situation, which was again was a BS move. I talked to these Border Patrol agents, and a lot of them, I sense that the morale is pretty low. And then, of course, when Biden made his photo op visit in a cold zone there in Brownsville a few weeks ago, which made absolutely no sense, the rhetoric that was coming out from the Border Patrol union of saying, "Hey, listen, keep our name out of your mouth," right? Do you agree with that in terms of their messaging in regard to that? Because they had some pretty bold things to say about Joe Biden around that visit. What were your thoughts there?
I do want to say specifically to the morale. I was 1,000 miles away in Yuma when that horse patrol incident happened. I wanted to throw up. I couldn't believe that. The commander in chief would say something like that. But again, it goes back to normalizing bad behavior. They just victimizing people, and that's just what they do. As far as that visit that he did in McAllen, I think in the 3 days preceding his arrival, there was just over 34 apprehensions in Brownsville in that specific location, and just over 1,300 in Eagle Pass, 300 miles upriver. The union again is they get to speak separate from anything associated with the agency, so they are a collective bargaining group that speaks freely, and they worked tirelessly to get a lot of the things that we needed under President Trump, at least from their perspective. I'm glad that they stood strong and made those type of comments, because he was going to go down there and take a victory lap to say, look, see, we got this under control. Things are working. If you just finish up what I've started with this Senate bill, we'll get the job done. No, he was just completely looking through a straw, of what was going on in the area, as opposed to the entire process. Go up, 1,000 miles, come to Arizona where I'm at, where they're catching 1,500 a day and having, 500 gotaways. It's not controlled. It's still got its problems. And it was strictly a photo op to say he was down there, because his poll numbers in, the final stretch of his hopefully fourth quarter and not halftime are immigration and border security are number one concerns for Americans. So he had to at least put the public face out that he was going down there to learn, and but he quickly turned that, and what he always does, into somebody else's problem and somebody else to blame. I've never seen that much pointing the finger back at his predecessor, as he likes to say, and political party. Than in my lifetime, to be honest with you. I don't recall. There's always the political jabs as part of the bannering that makes it fun, but this one is, every problem is not mine, and any good thing is all mine. It's just it's nonsense.
You're right about that. It's almost laughable and comical. Unfortunately, it works, because there's a lot of people out there that have no concept of common sense or critical thinking skills, and so they believe this garbage that's out there. I mean, you talk about mindless and uneducated, but they just kind of stick their head in the sand and float through life. I look at this. I look at this situation that we're facing, and there's a lot of people out there who say, I can't believe they say this, but I've literally in recent days had people say to me, there's no real danger. There's no real threat of what's going on. Everything's under control. How do you respond to somebody like that without just smacking them in the mouth?
Yeah. Unfortunately, that one I would definitely get thrown in jail for, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would say they're willingly being ignorant. They are living in this Pollyanna world that no longer exists, that the threats are out there. We were kind of talking about it just a few minutes ago about the number of of countries that are, not necessarily our friends, China, Russia, some of the other countries that we're seeing, especially South America, where there's just been, prisoners being released and things like that, like from Venezuela. Those threats are real. When you see the craziness that you're seeing going around the world, look, Christopher Wray, their FBI director, I think it was in November, said he's never seen the amount of activity in this country. You have to go back to, after 9/11. That's the current FBI director saying that in an open hearing. If that doesn't pull your head slightly out of the sand, I don't know what will. And not only from a militarization or a terrorist piece, but just what we've just been talking about a lot on this show is the Lake and Riley situation. Those people exist out there that are going to do us harm. You have gang members that are we're catching. There's 500,000 gotaways every year the last few years. Who is in that mix, right? We've got this Tren de Aragua, I think, is the Venezuelan gang that are ruthless. They're combining with Sinaloa and MS-13 gang members. Do you think they're going to, do nice things in your neighborhood, or are they going to start, causing problems? Again, I don't want to broad brush this situation, but these are specific problems that happen when you have an uncontrolled, welcomed illegal immigration flow because they are not looking at the big picture. Go back to the experts. Go back to the field leadership. Go back to your law enforcement. I'm pretty sure Joe Frank will tell you the same thing, that they know those bad apples are coming through. Those are the known gotaways. There's still that unknown factor because there's areas out there that we haven't been able to get out to on a regular basis. So who's in that mix? And one other thing too, to the people that say that it's not that bad. Well, they haven't arrived in their cities yet. And talk to people that have lived along the border that these people are passing through when they're caught and released. Talk to the people in Chicago that are getting booted out of their public sector areas and their housing locations because they're making room for migrants. Look at what's happened in New York City. These are things that, that are impacting Americans that should never happen. I will say this too. They're just, obviously I'm not going to talk anything that's classified or anything like that, but when you look about, the Chinese nationals, and as I said, I don't want to broad brush a complete demographic or nationality, but we had 24,000 of those arrested last year, compared to like 450, in the previous year. And now I think we're already over 20,000 this fiscal year. They're a very stoic group. They don't give a lot of information, and it's not easy to leave China. So for them to be able to leave China, get to Mexico and come up, and then we have to translate, and hopefully we got all the information we need. That's a little concerning because, again, the government of China is playing like the 100-year marathon, right? They know that they're not going to defeat us, with conventional war. It's going to be the long game. And so you wonder, right? So it just makes you think, okay, what are we doing? If they are an existential threat, why aren't we trying to stop this? Why are we allowing that to happen? Plus, we know that they're the ones that are bringing in all the fentanyl into Mexico, and at least the precursors that's coming in and poisoning us. So, there's a lot of things people have to recognize. That
there was
we're out the security piece, Chad, and not the immigration piece. We can figure that out. We've got to stop the illegal stuff. That's the most important.
See, there's so many questions because that's another pushback. They would say, "Oh, but see, we arrested those people. We arrested those Chinese nationals, so the border's secure. We apprehended them, so there's no problem."
Yeah.
I hear this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. There were encounters. That means they were apprehended. How do you respond to a person like that?
Yeah. Okay. So here's how you do that, right? When the cartel is controlling who and when and where they come in, they do that to overwhelm our Border Patrol resources. So they send 200, 300, 400 people at a time over the course of a few hours into one location. The Border Patrol has to pull off of its primary patrol missions to come in there and deal with that. And it may shut down an entire sector, or at least part of an entire sector for a whole shift to get them into control, get them in buses, get them in process. What do you think's happening in the rest of that area? The cartel is pushing everything else through. I had areas and times in Yuma, I was responsible for 126 linear miles. There were 4 people on a shift covering 126 linear miles because we were catching 1,000 people a day in 2 locations, just turning themselves in the gaps in the fence.
Yeah.
Lord only knows what came through, because to put that onus on those 4 agents to try to do the best they could. And I know they responded to anything they could, but that's the problem, right? It's like, oh, well, I could just tell you from a field perspective, if we're catching stuff every day, let's say, I know at one point in my career, I was at a station where we led the nation in marijuana seizures, but every day we were catching a ton of marijuana. We know we were missing probably equal or more, because that was almost like they were willing to give that to us. The same thing applies when we're catching 1,000 pounds of fentanyl at a port of entry. Well, when all our resources are focused on flow and managing the mass of humanity, we get lucky. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good when it comes down to this interdiction. So when all our resources are focused on one problem, the other problem gets to grow. And so, not dismissing that we've done some good work by making some apprehensions and making some seizures. But I can tell you right now, ignoring the fact that we're missing probably equal or much or as much because of this continuous flow of people, that would be wrong of me, even as a sitting chief, when I'd say, hey, our numbers look good. Well, sir, we never even got to patrol in Welton today. Oh, well, I won't highlight that in the daily report to headquarters, because that's, I would hit some, recall and send another message, send me more help, because I can't even patrol my border. I mean, again, and I'll give you a long answer on that and kind of talk in circles, but the reality is this: we're only as good as we are. When we have the resources to get out there. If we're catching things, that's a good thing, but I know we're missing stuff. And how do you deal with those people? You're never going to be able to deal with those people. They're looking for their argument. Hey, you're catching more people. That means the border's secure. If you're writing more speeding tickets, does that mean less people are speeding now because you're writing more speeding? No, it just means every time you got somebody pulled over, more people are speeding by you. It's just crazy. I guess it's some of this stuff. It's hard for me to explain because it's so simple to me. Because I've been out there.
Chris, and I've told this story before. I said, there's cases where the cartel will take a 2-year-old, throw him in the river, and agents will go try to save the baby out of the river. So 200 yards up the thing, it's the same concept.
Yeah.
Now it's a distraction deal. We're over here. We're going to distract you over here while it's happening, up the river a little ways, in another point of, where they're coming across. Doing
that for decades. I mean, that was always the deflection. We used to, when I first got to Yuma, we'd have these large give ups, 200-300 at a time, and the agents were responding. And I was like, hey, hold off, man. Because they were complaining every time we would respond, there would be 50 of them that would jump and start rocking and jumping the fence and running away and vanishing into the neighborhoods. I was like, well, hold on a second. Don't be so quick to respond, because this is what the cartel's banking on. They push a group of 100 into one area. They're monitoring. As soon as they see you and everybody respond, they're going to send that other group through. And those are all going to be your prior deports, your criminals, your high value targets. Hold off. We got them on camera. These people are sitting here. They're not going anywhere. We're controlling the situation. And so that's it. That has played out. It continues to play out. Why do you think they're sending them out there in Jacumba in San Diego area, out of the middle of nowhere? It's easy access on Highway 2, but it is in the middle between 2 sectors. It's going to pull resources from San Diego to go all the way out there to pick them up, or El Centro to go out there and pick them up. And they're going to be, there's those groups. That's where a lot of those Chinese were given up. that is by design to make us more vulnerable so they can be, they being the cartel and the smuggling organization, can be more successful. I mean, that's why it's so important we shut down this illegal immigration, and that way we can focus on the real problem, people getting away, and figure out better ways to deal with the mass flow of people. And really that starts with, from the top down, and that's just not going to happen, under this administration.
Well, we've got an administration that did more to control people's use of ivermectin during COVID than they ever worried about fentanyl coming across the southern border, which is amazing to me.
Yeah.
But again, and then the other argument people want to say is, well, Biden's deported way more people than Trump ever dreamed of. Yeah, that's because there's twice as many, almost 3 times as many people who have come to the southern border. I mean, when you have more you're dealing with, you probably will have more.
I would question the deportation numbers. They like to change things, just like they go from migrant to newcomer, arrest, apprehensions to encounters, expulsions. I can assure you, in the past, at least under the Obama-Biden administration, those numbers were not readily available about how many people were truly removed. So there, 1 or 2 flights a day is not keeping up with the flow of people when we're still catching 6,000-7,000 people a day and we're sending back 600 a day. I mean, it's a math problem. I have not seen or have access to, obviously, the deportations, but people will use the expulsions and the removals that as a they're playing those numbers. I do not believe. Look, if we caught 2.2 million people last year, or 2.4 million at the border, I don't believe half of those people were deported. Some may have been kicked back, but look, I can tell you right now, we know 900,000 were caught and released by Border Patrol at the Border Patrol stations last year. I mean, that was an official number put out by CBP in some hearing. How many did they turn over to ICE and how many did ICE release? We don't know that yet. So I'm not buying that Biden's deported more because, he's accepted more. He's allowed more in. So even if he did deport more than Trump, there wasn't that many people coming because we had ended catch and release and we had closed the loopholes. Yeah, there was some pandemic things that were slowing some of the movement across the globe. But at the end of the day, 900,000 people in 19 dropped to 400,000 people in 2020. That, and then it's, spiked up. So that's a policy shift. That's not that's not anything more than just, again, was it in his, one of his debates, Biden said, I'd tell everybody to come. That's what we're about. Bring them all. I'd surge the border. That was ridiculous.
I've even heard the rhetoric of people saying that the vice president, the so-called border czar, says she told him not to come. She whispered into the microphone, "Don't come." Yeah, that's real effective.
I got to tell you, I was a little. Every year we would do a border safety initiative to talk about the dangers of the journey as the temperatures, heated up, especially in the desert. I was in Yuma and did 2 years of those. Like May 10th, it was already like 110 degrees at noon. I'm doing a border safety initiative with the Mexican consulate there in the desert. And I basically had the phrase as part of a statement about do not come, do not make this journey because of the temperature. Yuma Sector Chief echoes Border Czar's comment about do not come. I was like, man, don't ever equate me to that border czar that no one can define what the heck that border czar does. I was like, really? That's what how about the son of a gun stand out there with his head on fire because it was 110 degrees at noon, talking about the dangers and what we're doing and the rescues and all the efforts we're doing. It just said, Chief echoes border czar by saying, do not come. I'm like, oh man. That one, don't be above the fold on that one, please don't. But
that's no kidding. Bury that one, please.
I didn't. That's not in my shelf anywhere behind me. I can promise you that. What was that? What is the border czar all about, right? I mean, it's done nothing. She made one trip to Guatemala, made that speech. She went to El Paso and with
which was a layover.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, she stopped in El Paso for a layover on her way to Guatemala.
I built that processing facility when I was deputy chief there. We put that together, and then Chief Chavez was still there at the time, and it was a safe environment for processing that we had to deal with, right? And look, and regardless of who's in the office of president, vice president, we don't want anything bad to happen to them. So it's going to be controlled and scripted. I get all that. Mm-hmm. And for the safety of the people that hold that office and for our country, that physical part, that's one thing. I'm all about that. But the stuff that they speak, that's where they got to speak the truth. You know what? They need to be able to tell the truth. And we're not hearing that from this administration. They're pointing fingers. That McAllen trip, I think he came off and talked about how there's all that technology sitting in a warehouse, because they wouldn't pass a bill. You know how much money they're spending and everything else in this department that they couldn't, if they really wanted to install that technology and have it deployed, they would have done it. $300 million is budget dust to this administration. $300 million is budget dust to the department's $97 billion budget. So that's a lot of money to us folks, but to a huge government budget like that, if they wanted it out there, they would have it deployed. This is a political point that is, again, making our border less safe and Americans more vulnerable because of politics, and that's the frustrating part.
Well, I mean, don't you know, Chief, if the Republicans would just approve this border bill that's sitting here, in front of Congress, this thing would be fine. I mean, the president's told us that. Everybody online wants to tell you that. It's Republicans, it's the GOP that's standing in the way of this wonderful, beautiful border bill. Every time somebody says that to me, I challenge them. I say, I want you to give me details, bullet points. You tell me how this border bill will secure our southern border. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I live in a state where one of the authors is the sitting senator's Sinema. She was 12 minutes late to a 15-minute Zoom when I was chief, and I think collectively over the 2 years I was there, she never came down and met with me, and we talked for maybe 3 minutes. She did always put her focus on the humane treatment of migrants, and she did always ask how the agents were. So I'll commend her for that. But that border bill, that Senate bill, the only thing I agreed with on it was increasing the detention for ICE up to 50,000 a day, basically doubling, which is what they started with, mind you, when this administration took over. So it was just resetting it back. Everything else was about migrant processing, migrant facilitation, the NGOs. The technology was done mainly for the processing, and it gave you a number about, when it hit a certain number of people crossing, then it would trigger an emergency order that the president could shut things down. So there's a couple things right there. Number one, it shows they could shut it down. Why wait to the number? Number two, you're telegraphing to the bad guys what that magic number is. So if they send 3,500 or 3,700 or 3,900 a day, that's okay. If you send 1,200 a day, 3 days in a row to Yuma, you sink that small sector. So we're gonna shut that sector. We're gonna overwhelm that sector, but we're not gonna close things down. All right, you're not gonna give the latitude to the sector chief or the port director out there to say, all right, we're shutting it down. We're activating the emergency order based on these criteria. No, they didn't do that. They were giving it to the secretary. They were also giving the secretary more authority to determine asylum levels, right? The credible fear levels. Well, we know where he's focused on. He's going to lower the bar. It's a privilege to be in the United States and remain here as a guest. We should raise the bar. That was going to be bad. So I think the Senate bill was a complete non-starter because it didn't address border security. And what people often forget is we're sitting on maybe 300 days now. H.R. 2 has been waiting there, and the Senate refuses to take it up or even discuss it. The first four pillars, if I recall, and I'll probably get it wrong, the first one was securing the border, basically finishing the wall construction where it made sense and hardening the ports. It was increasing Border Patrol agent personnel to a higher level. I think it was into the 3,000 to 5,000 plus people. There was technology for enforcement, cameras. And then I think there was some other backing with CBP personnel and instituting the Migrant Protection Protocol. That's what it was. So the first 4, if I remember, on HR 2 were about border security. That's lacking in the Senate bill. It's more about migrant facilitation. What this administration has done is they want to give you more buckets to bail the water out. They don't want to fix the leak. So you're sitting in a boat that's sinking. Well, here's some more buckets we'll give you. Bail faster. Instead of saying, hey, here's something material to stop the leak. They won't do that. HR 2 was stopping the leak with some buckets to help you get back afloat.
Yeah.
The Senate bill was just buckets. And again, we're living it right here. Oh, and no, certainly it was about giving more money to the non-government organizations that are getting reimbursed for the facilitation of migrants once they're caught and released by Border Patrol and CBP. So I got to tell you, I have a lot of respect. I still do for Senator Lankford, who was one of the lead Republicans on this bill. I don't know how he got sideways with it, because I think he had his intent in the right place, but somewhere he lost control of it. I don't know. I won't even speculate, but I don't think what was put out would have been what he was originally wanting, because he knows the importance of securing the border. I think what they were looking at is they just want to treat symptoms instead of treating the root cause. I get going, man. I mean, this is.
I love it. I love it. That's why you and I get along, because you're just spitting out the truth, man. How serious is this human trafficking thing? I mean, there's a lot of talk about it. You talk about numbers. If you go back and look at the statistics of the increase in violent crime, sexual crime, rape, things like that have happened since 2020, the numbers skyrocketed exponentially. If you look at those numbers in the U.S., and I'm talking about directly related to illegal migrants coming in, because they're the ones who have been either apprehended or accused or alleged or whatever. But the cartels, if you go back and you watch when Joe Biden gave his response to the State of the Union when George Bush gave it, they should have just played that clip after his State of the Union the other night, because he was the one calling, saying that we need to have strike forces that go against the cartels. And I mean, this is Joe Biden saying this. I mean, I was like, yeah, I'm down with this. I think let's call them what they are. They're narco terrorists, and these are not good people here, and they're funding this, and they're organizing strategically, making this happen. How serious, though, is specifically, the human sex and child trafficking of what's happening at the southern border?
Yeah, no, it is serious, and I certainly don't have stats memorized and things like that, but I can tell you, kind of the process of why and how this is happening. And it really is good that there's a couple movies out there that have gained a lot of attention last year that drew attention to this basically worldwide phenomenon of human trafficking. So most victims of trafficking don't know that they're victims until it's too late, because in its purest sense, it's about control. It is indentured servitude, slavery, prostitution, all that kind of stuff, mental and emotional control. They're not free to go, then it kind of falls into that trafficking world. And so the smuggling organizations, the cartel, and I use them interchangeably, but the cartel is the big player, and then just organizations that fall within there. They've realized that they're commodity neutral. First of all, whatever they can sell at a profit, they're going to do it. And they've realized that moving people is so much more profitable and has less risk and lower costs than drugs. Because for drugs, you got to receive and pay, you got to manufacture, you got to sneak it across, you got to get it to the end user, and you got to get the money back. When you're smuggling and trafficking people, it's on the front end. And the way the policies have been working over this administration is they just got to get them to the border. You tell them to give up, and then the Border Patrol will ultimately catch and release you, and you'll end up in your destination. So these cartels are recognizing how much money can be made. And when I was chief, the number in Yuma went from $5,000 to $15,000 a head, just depending on who you were, where you were going, what organization, what travel agency, if you will, you were using. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't have $15,000 to pay to do something like that. So, and if you're a family of four, they may cut you a deal. Mm-hmm. But here's where the trafficking piece comes in. So now I own you because I'm going to cut you a deal, and your wife and your daughter are going to be subject to my rules now. And they're going to be, you're going to pay off that debt because I'm going to find you a job and I'm going to put them to work as well. Now, we're grown men here, so, we can talk about it, but that's where the sex, the rape, the torture, all that thing happens. And also along the journey to show power, they will take women and they will rape them in front of the group so they can say, hey, this is what we will do. This is 2024, and I've got a buddy of mine who just came back from Mexico, was talking to a convicted trafficker, and still there's organ harvesting going on a regular basis that people are, buying organs. That's trafficking. That stuff is real, right? Mm. And so when these people make it to the border and they're in the agent's hands, so many of them are actually, the families have been broken up and separated and reorganized before they even cross, so the cartels can control. So they'll take the husband and wife and split them up and switch the kids and make a new couple. So when they come across, I'm going to comply with whatever you tell me to do, because my wife and her new husband are going across 100 miles away and my kids are with her. So whatever you tell me to say or do, I'm going to do it. And in hopes that I'm going to be caught, processed, and released, and then reunited with my family. That is trafficking, because you are no longer in control, and Lord knows what is happening to them, right? This is human exploitation at its finest. And this is what happens when you have these policies. This is what happens when progressive thinking, oh, we need to help and let everybody in. They are putting people in harm's way. They're encouraging people to make this journey to get in the hands of the cartel, who will take advantage of people for $1. These people are horrible people, these smugglers. They do not care. And human lives are being impacted forever. The stories that I have heard from both migrants, from people that are subject matter experts in trafficking, real-time stuff about what happens in hotel rooms south of the border as they're waiting, it's horrible. That if they see a female that is bruised up and they don't think that she could be of value, they are discarded. I mean, these are the things that you hear about, and this is why securing the border, having strong policies that require you to go through a process, a lawful process that minimizes your impact and reach from the cartel so you can come in a safe way, is so vital. You got the left that screams it's a humanitarian crisis. Yeah, you've created this by your poor policies. You're creating these victims. And that's just that's just the stuff that is tip of the iceberg. It is going on domestically. Some of the things that I'm working on and some of my, other side projects is using technology in the form of machine learning and AI to combat human trafficking on the online, because everything, as you know, is done right here on the cell phone. And that's what's happening. And these smugglers are taking advantage of people that are desperate, people that have been told a bunch of lies about how to come over here, and they are victimizing these folks. And the last thing I'll say is, if if you knew all this, why aren't you doing? Because, we had ICE doing DNA testing. That project ended under this administration. I can tell you, once we started finding the fraud family units and we would prosecute these people and we would reunite these children, as soon as we walked up with a Q-tip, people would break. Like, okay, yeah, no, this is not my kid. This is my friend's. I mean,
wow.
And we stopped that. Why did we stop that? I don't know. It was a pilot that never got funded. Again, I'm not going to even go down that why we stopped it, but that was what we were told. Second of all, when you have I'll use Yuma as example. If I had 200 people working in a 24-hour, multiple shifts, maybe on a heavy day, we have 200, 225 agents, but we're catching 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 a day, and we're being told, hey, you got to get these people out of your custody. You got to move them quick. You don't have the time to do that follow-up that you really would want to do. I mean, if there was something glaring, if there was something showed up in the records, we would obviously do that. But that's what we should be doing with every one of these groups that would come across, every family unit when they're coming from around the world, to verify. But the system doesn't give us that information, and we don't have the luxury of hands-on because we're so pressed to get people out, because the bus is going to arrive and the plane's going to come here and you got to get people on the flight line, and the NGO, he has so many hours they can work. So it becomes a production line. The cartels did that intentionally. They broke the system, and it allows the trafficking thing to continue on. That, to me, aside from my agents' well-being and safety, the gotaways, the third thing that used to keep me up at night would be, what victim did we not get a chance to possibly save because of the poor policies that have been enacted and the amount of people that are coming through? That, again, Chad, that's real. I think you could talk to any agent out there. And I want to say this too. I want your audience to know, just by me saying that it's happening doesn't mean that our agents are not doing their due diligence. They will do everything they can if they have the opportunity, but we weren't given the opportunity as much as we should because it was about getting people out of custody. And but I can tell you, if we saw a red flag or our spidey senses went off, the agents were going to follow through with it. Bless you. The agents were going to follow through with it. We just didn't always have that luxury over the last few years. And that's like I said, that's one of the things that kept me up at night is what did we miss that we should have caught?
That's another reason why I was going to say it earlier when we were talking about the horsemen, is I'm pretty defensive when it comes to these agents, because I see a lot of rhetoric online where it says, well, these federal agents, these Border Patrol agents, ICE agents, they're complicit. They're doing traitorous stuff. They're doing what they can. I mean, for lack of better terms, I mean, it's hard when you got your hands tied behind your back.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying earlier, when you're working for bureaucracy, it's next to impossible to be effective. And these men and women are doing just the absolute best job that they can do. And it's unfortunate that in the court of public opinion, there's a lot of people out there who think that they're complicit in this. And that's just a damn shame.
Well, it pisses me off too, because that's the kind of language you hear, like, oh, we were just following orders, and they'll say, well, that's what the Nazis said and blah, blah, blah. Look, we were upholding the law. We were enforcing the law. The problem is the law is gray that allows for policy adjustments within it, right? So Congress writes these laws that have a lot of left and right latitude, right? That gives the executive the opportunity. So yes, we did arrest people for entering illegally, but what we do from there is then controlled by policy. The law supports us detaining them and removing them and all that stuff. But policy in the law also gives us latitude to say, well, you can make a deferred decision if there's no room to release them on their own account. So policy drives that. And again, that used to bug the heck out of me, because they're like, well, you're complicit. You're letting these people go. And I mean, I'm in a public forum, like, it's your fault. You're the one letting them go. I'm like, if they die here in my custody, I'm going to be blamed for their death. I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. But that's why it's lonely at the top. When you're in leadership, you've got to make these decisions. But again, I'm not sitting there defending or want people to feel sorry for me. We did everything we possibly could do to uphold the law, and then we would be told and continue the policies that we thought was in our best interest until we were told not to do it. And that goes back to some of that hypocrisy. I'd get a phone call from one person in Washington saying, hey, you really need to put as many agents as you can out there and really hold that line. And then an hour later, like, hey, we noticed you didn't have all your processing computers, running like you should, and you didn't release as many people as you did yesterday. I'm like, what do you want? Do you want me to put more people out there? Because if I put more people out there, that means less to process. Well, then your numbers are going to go up in custody. I'm like, yeah, my resources didn't change. It's a math problem. And so, yeah, we end up getting into that situation where, we'd have to flip a coin some days of like, are we going to put more people out there on the line to slow this down? Or are we going to run the risk of being at 6,000 people in custody in a place that can only hold 1,000? Remember, this was also in the middle of a pandemic, so no telling what the hell people were getting exposed to. So there was a lot of that, right? And yeah, it used to bug me, and it still does to this day about, oh yeah, you're complicit. I don't read a lot of the comments on some of the social media things, like, oh yeah, he's one of those, he's the one supporting and complicit. He should have been fired too. Complicit, man, we caught everybody we could, and but yeah, that's just ignorance. And I take social media comments like Olympic scoring. The high praise, throw it out. The negative hate, throw it out. And somewhere in the middle is a little bit of that common sense. Because it's probably my wife saying the nice things about me, and then the haters, going to say the negative things. But
well, I mean, we all know, Chris, that you are a white xenophobic bigot. You're one of the mean, narrow-minded people, and that's the thing. It's like, what you were saying about trafficking in the cartels.
Not true, by the way. I want to make sure that I'm not. I'm actually probably more moderate people when it comes down to border security. Because here's the way I look at our government has three roles to help us the pursuit of happiness, and that's a strong military to protect us around the world, strong domestic law enforcement, which includes our borders and our urban and domestic policing, and then they need to make sure we have a strong economy. If we do those things, we can all pursue happiness. And that's kind of where I see it. The rest of the government, get the hell out of my life, And this is somebody who worked for the government. But securing our borders should not be xenophobic or racist or bigoted or anything. It's every other country in the world does it. I often, when I speak, Chad, I talk about how we have locks on our front doors. We have locks on our bedrooms, locks on our bathrooms. And sometimes people have bathrooms in their bedrooms with locks on those doors. But as soon as you talk about a lock on the front door of this country, it becomes divisive, vitriolic, you're xenophobic, racist, because you want to put a lock on the front door of this country. How dare you? But again, the people that are usually that way are locked in their mom's basement or locked up somewhere else,
Well, and again, I see the rhetoric where people say, well, the only thing Trump ever did was separate families, which, I mean, you've quite effectively dispelled that situation.
No, let's live on that one. That was a prosecution initiative. And everywhere that we have prosecuted people for coming in illegally, we shut it down, or we deflected it into enough locations to where we can have a better tactical control of the area. And there's no place else in this country that if I'm driving with my family and I get arrested for whatever, probably would be criminal speeding in my sports car, right? But if you robbed a bank, if you were DUI, if you got into a domestic fight with somebody at a traffic jam, my family's going to be left behind. They're going to separate me for violating the law.
That's right.
That whole separation thing, the whole prosecution initiative that happened in 2018. The problem with that, in theory, it was a tactical operation that was going to slow things down and send a consequence. Problem is everybody that we needed to be in place, the Marshal Service, the prosecutor, the U.S. Attorney's Office, some of the Health and Human Services and shelters, they weren't prepared for all of this. So that goes back to that effective but clunky. And that's why it started and stopped, because there was so much bad publicity. Nobody was ripping children from their families. It was, look, it's time for dad, who is a 2-time prior deport ag felon, to go. You're going to have to hug your mom and dad goodbye. You got to go. Or you got to hug your wife and children goodbye. You got to go. You're a 2-time ag felon. But yet that gets captured. It shows you're ripping families apart. You hear that even to this day about that. And Nowhere else in our justice system, if you are a criminal and you have family with you, you would be separated, at least temporarily, from your family. And that was the intent, was to shut down the traffic that was happening in El Paso, because it was certainly on the rise in 2018, at the end of 17 and early 18 when we started that. But that's, again, haters are going to hate. They're going to say that stuff. Those initiatives are effective. They're an effective tool to the consequence delivery system that actually could help us, again, maintain the integrity of our enforcement systems. We're never going to win that battle of the narrative on social media, because they saw the mainstream media, backed by some popular, progressives, make those type of statements. Excuse me, and those sheep just blindly follow that. And instead of pausing and putting some critical thinking on and said, hey, this doesn't make sense, what happened? They didn't ask those questions, and so they just think that way.
Yeah, it's insane. And again, everything that you've said here is coming from a perspective of passion and compassion towards this issue, right? It's the fact that people are politicizing so many different things, when it's like, look, this is a common sense issue. It should be a common sense issue, and we are, as you said earlier, it's a self-inflicted wound. And is there a way? I mean, if Trump is reelected, and let's say Trump does everything he says he's going to do, that and I truly believe that he could effectively shut the border down in 30 days. I mean, the thing could be changed almost overnight. But the people that are here. Is there any possible way to be able to round up people that are here illegally and deal with that? I mean, can that even effectively be done at this point, or are there just too many here?
Well, I want to address something, and you said it, because I use this quite often. This is a common sense and compassion. You got to look at this problem through a lens of common sense and compassion, right? Mm-hmm. Common sense is building the infrastructure where it makes sense, controlling the border, stopping the illegal entries and slowing it down. And compassion, not only for our agents who are dealing with it, the communities that are impacted by it, but also the migrants that are caught up in this whirlwind, because they're trying to get a better life. Or at least that's what we want to believe. So if you look at this problem with a lens of common sense and compassion, we're going to get to some kind of reasonable solution. Mm-hmm. I talk often about tall fences and wide gates, right? That's the way we should look at our border and immigration. We need tall fences, which is all the things I mentioned where it makes sense: the wall, the lights, the cameras, the technology, the access routes, the personnel, the policies. The wide gates, and remember, gates can be opened and closed, right? But that should be our lawful pathways to let people come into this country the right way. We decide who and when, whether we're going to open it wide or we're going to narrow that gate based on what America needs. That wide gate should be these lawful pathways, updating the immigration system for 2024. So much of this is, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old policies. So that's kind of how I look at it. To me, that's common sense on the tall fences and compassion with the wide gates. Now, you mentioned that one of the things that President Trump has talked about is the deportations and getting people that are already here. So there's a couple things that you have to look at. The first and foremost is, will we have the political will, either as a citizenry or as a political body? Obviously, we know the left is going to denounce any type of mass deportation or roundup. They'll immediately say, "Oh, that's what the Germans did. That's Gestapo tactics. Not going to happen." And then our moderate and kind of lack of intestinal fortitude, Republicans, would they be willing to even stand up for that? So I don't see the political will. The administration, if it was the Trump administration, I have no doubt that they will put operations in place to go after those that are removable. There's a couple things we have to recognize as a country of law and order with the Constitution. Whether we like it or not, many of these migrants have been put in a notice to appear and in a removal process. They have a right to a hearing, or have even had initial hearings, and the judge has not made a decision. So we would be disrupting their Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment rights to due process, search and seizure. So that would immediately have an injunction on that, right? So I see that being a big stop. It'll go to a very lenient district that's going to put an injunction and stop it right away. So that's already the second hurdle. Where it could be effective is those that never showed up to their initial hearings and would have like a removal in absentia, okay? That means they didn't show up or the judges ordered them removed, and so they are subject to removal. They don't get a hearing, they don't get an appeal, they go. That would kick in some of the interior enforcement that we could do. Also, those that have been paroled in under some of these programs, both at the border and then under this, what I think is still a constitutionally wrong parole program that the administration is doing by bringing these people in. Parole is limited in scope. It's controlled by us so we can end a parole immediately. I see the vast majority of people for a roundup, for a deportation operation at scale to be effective. I think it'll be those that are paroled in would be the first. Those that have been ordered removed, those that have been ordered removed by a judge, that would be priority because they've got an existing warrant of arrest. Or those that have been paroled in, because we could end that just as soon as we began it, right? If I authorized you to come in paroled under for limited circumstances, I can also end that immediately at the best interest of the government. If the administration, if it was to be President Trump, says, you know what, I'm ending all these parole programs and everybody that was paroled in from these days to this date is done, I think by law, he's got the right to do that, and they could go execute it. They could be all sorts of challenges, but I think that would be upheld by the high courts because that is in the latitude of the executive, not judicial or legislative. So if we're tracking, again, I don't know if we'll have the political will. Number two, we got to make sure that we're not disrupting the due process that our Constitution allows, regardless of whether we agree that all these people should have been brought in or not. That's a hurdle. And then where we could see success would be those that have been ordered removed and didn't appear, or those that have been paroled. And I think that would be a substantial number of people and keep ICE occupied for quite a while, should that happen. But here's the most important piece, Chad, and all that. If nothing more, it sends a message that there will be consequences, and this lack of consequence that we've been allowing, this open border mindset that we've allowed to happen, is no more. And that right there will drop a huge percentage of those attempting to make the journey. So, and be happy to clarify any of those things I said.
Whether it's Joe Biden or somebody else that they select, depending, I don't know what's going to happen. We all make our prognostications and predictions about the November election. But if you've got another 4 to 8 years of this type of progressive administration, I mean, does this country even continue to survive at this rate, the way that we're moving? I mean, is it that big of a problem? No. Or can we just keep letting people flood in here and continue to exist?
Well, I think it's this is just my personal opinion, not representative of anything other than just what I believe. And I think we cease to exist as the United States that we know it, based on some of the things we talked about, earlier, right? You'll have a fundamental shift possibly in representatives and electoral colleges. So that's going to enable a party of power for a long time. The type of people, and again, that totally gets, abused by the media and some of the talking heads. Yeah, you know what? I know that I heard Biden say, Trump and his MAGA followers call him vermin. Well, guess what? That guy that killed Lakin, vermin. That's a nice way of putting it, right? So they just, when that type of rhetoric gets out there, and there's that, even though a small percentage are that caliber of people, it starts normalizing bad behavior. And I think if we continue to see millions of people from all over the world coming in here and flooding our system and getting handouts, if you will, that are, it really will start shifting the way this constitutional republic was designed. And when when only one party is in power, that's what's going to happen, right? I think that there's all sorts of theories out there, and Sun Tzu type of theories, but they're not going to beat us in a conventional war. We're going to implode from within, and this is the start of it, right? This is how it's going to happen. So if we don't get things under control, I think we are headed down a path that we're not going to be able to change course, in the next 4, 8 to 12 years. So we need to pump the brakes. Whether that's Trump or somebody else in the next election or the next 2 elections, the brakes need to be pumped. We need to start. Charity starts at home, and what has happened is you're seeing this complete erosion of empathy across the country because we're all feeling the pain of what's happened over the last few years, whether it's the border security crisis, whether it's economic issues, inflation, gas prices, all this, wars going around the globe. Look, we've got a problem right here in front of us that we need to fix. And that's, we got homeless children, homeless veterans, but yet we're bringing in hundreds of thousands, a million of people a year onto that dole. And that's not sustainable. And I think that kind of gets to, we've got our priorities in the wrong order, man. And that's, now if you say America first, it becomes political speech. And where is that wrong to put your country first?
Right.
God, country, and family, man, or God, family, and country. Because I gotta. If we don't have a country, I gotta take care of my family.
Yeah.
So
I've been asking that for years now.
Yep.
I don't know where that became a problem.
Yeah. I didn't even know what xenophobic was. I never even heard the word or used the word. It was something that what's his name, Chavez from down in Venezuela was bashing the United States and translating into xenophobic. I was like, what the hell is that word? Then all of a sudden it was talking points in the United States. It's like, that was not in my vernacular. Now I have to defend putting this country first.
Yeah, and that's the thing, as you alluded to earlier. They're always changing the language, and it just becomes a more acceptable, more palatable, launderable way of looking at something, which is pathetic.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, though, Chief, you're opening a lot of people's eyes, whether you realize it or not. Listen, you just did Theo Vaughn's podcast. That's a big podcast.
Yep.
I mean, Theo's reaching a lot of people. And I know people's eyes are opening because, a guy like Theo, who's a comedian, for those of you who don't know, and Theo's blown up pretty big in a big way in recent years. He doesn't have to address these issues.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to deal with these issues. And yet he had you on the show, and, first of all, how was that? Being able to go in there and talk about these things with a guy like Theo, and then what was the response to your interview with him?
I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm still kind of on cloud 9 about that because he's actually. I used to listen to his not necessarily to his podcast, but a lot of his comic shorts on satellite radio and things like that. There's quite a few comedy routines I love that he does. He's from Covington, Louisiana. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. So I lived in Mandeville, Louisiana, a mile from Covington. So there's that connection. And so when the producer reached out to me and asked if I wanted to come up on the show, they took me up there and, we sat there we recorded for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. The actual podcast runs about, with a few minutes of editing, it was 2 hours and 39 minutes or something like that. This morning we were over 720,000 views on YouTube, and it's also on Spotify and other podcast, Apple Pod, so I would say probably equal or as many people have heard it than they sat there and watched it. I loved it in the fact that here is, to your point, a whole different audience that didn't have to do it, right? He's used to having other comedians and celebrities and rock stars and athletes and things like that on there talking about funny stuff and cracking jokes. He brought up a serious topic because he was concerned that he wanted somebody who had been in the fight recently and lives down here on the border and can talk about it. And what was really nice was there was a lot of, kind of back and forth, kind of making sure that he understood what he wanted to ask. And really the questions were good. And he, just like you, he allowed me to talk. And, I will say this, I've been used to doing some of the news networks, and those are really very limited. You've done those, you got a few minutes. You're going to ask you specific questions, and they usually throw you a curveball, but you're done in 3 minutes or 4 minutes. this went on for a couple hours, 2.5 hours or more. And it was good because it really kind of brought them to the mainstream or to a whole different demographic. And so I was fully prepared for the onslaught of comments on the various social media platforms that it was out to, and also the ones he put out there, like on the Instagrams and the X. Having been a chief and had social media, I was used to the haters, but I will tell you that for every negative comment about me or the topic, there was 99 other ones saying this is the best episode they'd heard. This was episode 486 of a world-renowned comedian. To say, hey, that was a great podcast. That was so informative. Thanks for bringing it. I was thanking Theo for having this type of guest. The response was incredible. I mean, more than I could ever expect as far as gratitude. There was a lot of fun. It's the base is comedy, so a lot of people making fun of my hair. I had a camouflage blazer on, and they're like, this guy looks like, I think, a cross between Steven Seagal, John Travolta, a wrestling coach, and a pulled pork sandwich, which is my favorite. I'm like, oh, I like all of those people, and I'm kind of hungry for a pulled pork sandwich. So it was things like that kind of, was just breaking up the kind of the seriousness of it, people commenting. I know who the comedian Dane Cook is. Apparently everybody thought I was his dad, or he had gotten older and gotten all gray. So I thanked him I apologized to him. I said, I'm sorry. He actually messaged me. I said, I told him, all right, I messaged and P.S. Dane Cook, sorry for the comments. You still got it. And he actually messaged me like, hey, what's that all about? And I was like, well, they either think I was your dad or you aged gray, with gray.
I'll never look at you the same way again,
yeah,
Chris.
I had to look up some of the things that the Giga Chat. I guess apparently they thought I was an AI generated bot. That was pretty funny. The Botox and makeup, I'm like, which I'd never had Botox or makeup on. So it was just that kind of stuff cracked me up. Was this guy a chief or a professional wrestler? So there were some good things for my ego, right? But
funny.
All seriousness, it did bring some facts to an audience that may not have been willing to listen, that may have heard on the ancillary about how things are happening or what's true, what's fiction, or what's been made up. I think it woke up some people in a good way that, hey, this is a problem. They really appreciated that I was very down the middle. I wasn't leaning left or right. I was trying to keep it very centered based on facts. That I just like in this show, there was a lot of positivity by every administration until we got to this one. I humanized it because, suicides were happening, the morale problems, those are all things that I think opened some people's eyes, and the facts. Chad, I gave you the numbers, you can put your head in the sand all you want, but we go from 400,000 to 1.66 million. Nothing changed from December to January except the president. Why did, so I kept it facts-based, and I think that helped, was appealing to the audience. And again, that's kind of more than I could ever ask for, is that it was more positive than the negative. And I think some people were enlightened, at least, anytime I talk, and this is kind of funny because I never pause. But if I can give you an opportunity to pause and think about what I've said and make you either a little bit more informed based on the facts, whether you decide to change your viewpoint or not, at least you have something that, maybe you're a little bit more informed or educated as you go forth and make decisions about how we should address security, or how are you going to address it with your local legislation, or how you may even vote in November, based on some of the things you may or may not know. And so that's kind of how that platform played out for me. I threw in a couple Theo jokes in there. He threw some jokes at me that went over my head because I was not prepared for them. But it was a good time. A good time was had by all, I think. So it was fun. Definitely was a highlight of besides today, it was the highlight of some of the things I've been able to do the last few months.
I love it. I think it's fantastic, and congratulations on that. It's a big deal. I mean, it really is in terms of being on a platform that size. I mean, you make the rounds, you do, but I'm telling you, that's a big deal, and I'm glad shout out to Theo for doing that.
Yeah.
But again, you start to understand by the positive responses that you've gotten from that why Joe Biden has a 31% approval rating when it comes to his handling of border security. Yeah. I don't know who the hell those 30% are.
Yeah.
But, somebody out there is supposedly approving of his way of doing it. But no, by and large, the nation is not happy with our border situation, and it's got to change. So,
well, I just wish we could get back to where we're headed under President Trump, because again, I say that, and the media like, well, it's Trump. It was a culmination of everything that we had done in pretty much the existence of the agency. We're going to be the Border Patrol is going to be 100 years old this May. Those plans were requirements that our Border Patrol agents submitted. We had the right guy to get it done, that had the will to get it done under President Trump. And nothing more than just complete political spite because it doesn't make any sense why you would tear down a process that was designed and required by the agency. It wasn't 20 sector chiefs sitting there going, we're going to do this and I'm going to do that. It was like, what do you need? The boots on the ground, the men and women that are out there pulling the tire drags, that are walking the trails, that are dealing with the smuggling cases, that are having to jump in the rivers and rescue people, that are doing CPR on people that are, dying across in the deserts. What do you need to make your job better and to secure those borders? That's what the previous administration, Trump administration, finally actuated that we had wanted. It finally was coming to fruition. And again, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump all took steps and strides to secure the border. This is the first one that ever took us backwards. And, and that's just, hard for me to understand as a career law enforcement. And I think that, again, that is resonating with people because the border was always a border issue. It was not it's not happening in my backyard. I don't care. And now that it's resonating and we're seeing it, whether it's, look, I don't like the idea that Abbott and Ducey were busing people. I know why they did it, and I just wish we didn't have to do that. But
agreed.
It finally sunk into people across the country. Hey, there's a problem. When I hear people complaining of 30,000 people being dropped off, I'm like, well, what about 300,000 in a town of 100,000 like Yuma? We had 310,000 people caught 22 when I was the chief in Yuma. That town only has 100,000 people. So a city of multi-millions is complaining about 30,000 over the course of months. Oh, yeah. So again, I wish we never had to get there. But it took those bold actions, and I know people hate on those actions, but it took those bold actions to kind of wake up some people. And again, I don't want to laugh at human people, maybe the humans being exploited by the smugglers, but at the same time, when you see this type of reaction and the poll numbers that are coming out of the administration, it says, hey, you know what? People are getting tired of it. And, and hopefully something will change this November. It's got to, regardless of who ends up getting in there. It's going to be difficult, as we talked about a few minutes ago. It's going to be difficult if we continue down the same trajectory,
Well, brother, keep on rocking.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your service. I'm thankful for it. Thankful for you. Thankful for your friendship. Thankful for your voice. And I think you just that platform's enlarging for you. And you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because again, whenever somebody listens to you talk, you are fair about what you're saying. You're not pushing a political agenda or anything on one side or another, and that's what I appreciate about you. It's anybody with ears to hear. I mean, they're hearing logic. It shouldn't be that hard. to process this. So I appreciate that.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Chad. I'm grateful for the opportunity and the kinship we've been able to develop here. And any time you need to hear more or need clarification or want to do this again, and we know how to get a hold of each other and be more than happy to come back on.
Well, what I want to do is I want to get Shy, my producer here, and we'll jump on a plane. We'll come down there and visit with you.
Yeah.
And take a little walk around and do this thing live and
where are you? Where's home base for you? Are you in the Woodlands area or in that part of Texas? Okay.
Yeah, I've turned into a suburbanite. I'm in the uppity eco bubble of the Woodlands, Montgomery County, Texas.
I got married in Montgomery County, Texas. I think I went to Sam Houston just up the road from you. My in-laws live in Huntsville, and I got a sister lives in Spring. I got brothers that still live there. I'm actually looking. I may be in Houston in April, and if I do, I'll make sure you know. And
give me a shout.
I usually stay right in that area of Spring Woodlands area, just because that's where my sister lives. That's who I go see. So definitely make sure we can hook up if the opportunity presents itself. And but we'll figure something out if you come out this way or. You make any border trips, at least west of San Antonio, let me know, because I've always got a reason to go back and forth in places, and we could figure something out.
Yep. I'd love to do it, man.
Yeah.
I would love to do it. I think I told you I've made numerous border trips, up and down the Texas border, and I've been to the Arizona border once, and I love Arizona.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a certain kinships there that are these border states, man. Which we're all border states at this point, every place. But wow, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, California. I mean, it really does determine the shape of our nation in the coming generation. So,
well, I tell you what, it's a saying that a lot of chiefs just said. I know some testify saying, if you've been to one sector, you've only been to one sector. And think about it. Every one of those sectors that you've mentioned, the states you mentioned, every one of us has their own unique set of challenges. Whether it's the geography, the region, like El Paso being El Paso, Juarez, the largest international city in the world. It's a huge problem with all the infrastructure and things like that. But then you go down to Big Bend and Marfa, and you got nothing. Yet that's a problem because it's wide open, which means you take the wrong canyon and the smugglers go a different direction. So, and then here in Arizona, that's what Washington never understood, is it was never a one size fits all. In the same state, two different sectors. What I was dealing with in Yuma, Chief Modlin in Tucson had the complete opposite problem, and it's still that way to this day. And people don't look at that, and our bureaucrats and elected officials, I don't often call them elected leaders, like to look at this as, we're just going to do this. It's like, well, that's great for El Paso, but it's going to sink me in Yuma. And people don't look at that. There's 9 southwest border sectors that have 9 sets of unique challenges that require 9 different approaches. That's where, again, the wall system, technology, wall is not necessary in Big Bend, but technology and access roads and people backed by policies are. El Paso needs wall. San Diego needs wall. So anyway, but that's the beauty of being able to talk about it. I know to you and Shy's got some editing to do. I'm very loquacious, but it really is because I try to tell the story and get the information out there, and that's probably also. I don't do as many podcasts, or I haven't done as many podcasts as I've done news clips. So you try to get as much stuff in there to get your point before you're cut off. So if you got to do some editing, I apologize on all that.
No, I wanted all of it. I didn't want to monopolize your time, but I wanted all of it, man. So thank you for it.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Hey, your Twitter handle is @Clemster.
No. Twitter is @CClemOfficial. C Clem.
That's it. C Clem Official, and then Instagram
is Clemster71.
71.
Yeah,
I knew it was 70 something.
Yeah,
so we'll put it up there on the Cryon down there. We'll drop it so people will follow you.
Yeah, I'll text them to you so you have them just so it's in your record there.
Perfect, brother.
Hey, thank you so much. I know this kind of all unfolded in just a little over a week's time, so I'm grateful for it, and I hope we can continue this relationship and and to have me back on. I'm traveling tomorrow to Philadelphia. I was going to speak about the border up there to a group in Philly. So, that's kind of the neat thing about some of the things I'm able to do is I'm going around the country and talking to people that are, wanting to hear the facts. And, if it'll make a difference, it's worth it then. So,
and I hope that expands more and more for you, and it will.
Appreciate it.
All right,
man.
Chief Chris Clem, thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man.
You got it.
For those of you that are still with us, listen, go to watchchad.com for all the fun stuff is. Don't forget, leave us a rating and a review. Follow Chris online, and we will see you next time. Love you. God bless you. Bye.